Today we bring you a story containing betrayal, revenge, and the heartbreaking consequences of broken promises. We're talking about the events surrounding an event that came to be known as the Kirk Massacre, and more centrally, the tragic fate of Cherokee leader known as Old Tassel. Hello folks, I'm Steve Gilley, along with Rod Mullins, and this is another one of the stories of Appalachia.
Steve, I haven't heard of the Kirk Massacre before, but now I had heard of Old Tassel. I've heard of that name before, but you're going to have to fill me in. Of course, we'll fill everybody else in as we go through this story and everything. But Old Tassel kind of had a history, didn't he? A little history, I guess, with the Cherokee, so to speak.
Yeah. He was a powerful figure with the Cherokee.
Okay.
And one thing about this story, though, Rod, it also involves someone that you know very well, a man named John Sevier.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
he was in this as well. And when we get done with this, I'll tell you a little bit of a connection between that and some other things with John Sevier. How about that?
All right, then.
Well, folks, Old Tassel was the first beloved man of the Overhill Cherokee, a powerful figure who rose to prominence during the late 1700s. After the U.S. gained its independence in 1783, Old Tassel stepped up as a leader of the Cherokee with a strong belief in diplomacy and peace in an era marked by constant skirmishes and violence between settlers and native tribes.
Old Tassel wasn't just any leader, though. He's kind of considered as the first beloved man. Now, not literally, but that's at least what the Cherokee thought. He was essentially the chief of the Overhill Cherokee, representing them in crucial peace efforts. But his dedication to peace wasn't a very easy thing to do. The times during and just after the American Revolution were turbulent, and white settlers pushing further into the Cherokee lands. Old Tassel's challenge was immense. He was trying to keep his people safe while discouraging them from joining the wars with the European settlers moving into their lands, conflict that could lead to the defeat of the tribe. His desire to find a peaceful coexistence faced fierce opposition within his own community, especially from warriors like, I've heard of this name before, Steve, Dragon Canoe and his Chickamauga band, not music band, but his Chickamauga band, who were adamant about fighting to protect their lands. Dragon Canoe was a powerful force. Old Tassel fervently believed in a different path, though: treaties and negotiations.
And speaking of treaties, Rod, Old Tassel signed two important agreements with the Americans. First was the Treaty of Long Island in 1777, followed by the Treaty of Hopewell in 1786. These agreements were supposed to guarantee Cherokee land rights to the Overhill Territory, offering some degree of security against encroachment. Now, Old Tassel, ever the symbol of goodwill, even flew an American flag over his door, sewn by none other than Betsy Ross herself, and given to him by the U.S. government representatives at Hopewell. That flag was a symbol of Old Tassel's trust in these treaties. But as we'll tell you, trust can be a fragile thing. You see, despite Old Tassel's peaceful stance, tensions kept rising. And later, in 1786, a new agreement, the Treaty of Coitoy, was forced on Old Tassel by representatives of the newly proclaimed state of Franklin in what's now Tennessee. This agreement put even more strain on Cherokee relations by requiring the Cherokee to hand over any member of the tribe involved in violence against white settlers, essentially demanding they police their own people on behalf of those settlers.
Wow. Well, the Cherokee, understandably, were infuriated out of this whole thing. To them, this wasn't just about justice. It was about surrendering their sovereignty. And while Old Tassel tried to comply, things were about to take a dark turn. And that turn happened 2 years later in 1788, not far from Knoxville. The Kirk family had moved into Cherokee lands in what was then the southwestern edge of the frontier, right along the Little River. John Kirk, the head of the family, had left his homestead that day, leaving behind his wife and their children. And, as the story goes, that's when a Cherokee warrior known to the family as Slim Tom came by the Kirk home. Now, Slim Tom had been to the home before, and he was no stranger to the home and to the family. In fact, he asked the family for food, and they shared it with him. But as soon as he left, Slim Tom regrouped with the other Cherokee warriors in the nearby woods, planning to strike.
Now, Rod, when Slim Tom returned with his party, it was quick and it was ruthless. 11 members of the Kirk family were killed, 10 children and their mother. That's hard to imagine the horror of that scene. And, well, when John Kirk returned home to find his family slain, the shock and grief turned almost immediately into a call for revenge. That attack was brutal, and to settlers in the area seemed unprovoked. But these Cherokee were acting out of desperation and anger over that Treaty of Coy-Toy we talked about before. Well, for some, like the warrior Slim Tom, who was reportedly involved, this was a way of striking back against the encroachment of settlers on Cherokee lands. The news of the massacre spread quickly, and John Kirk rallied support from settlers and militiamen, including Colonel John Sevier, who was known for his leadership on the frontier. Now, these men were ready to retaliate, but what followed crossed a line, even for that time.
Well, Steve, in response, John Sevier, well-known frontiersman and governor of the state of Franklin, was quick to act. Sevier was attempting to quell Cherokee uprisings in the region, but his reaction to the Kirk Massacre was, well, especially intense. He gathered a militia determined to make an example of the Cherokee and set off toward Chilhowie Town, a Cherokee village down the Little Tennessee River. Although Sevier wasn't directly involved in what happened next, the incident certainly bore his mark. Another officer, Major James Hubbard, took command in Sevier's absence. He called for a parley under the flag of truce, hoping to speak with Cherokee Indians to resolve the rising tensions peacefully. Among those who answered the call was Old Tassel himself, along with another chief, Abraham, who was residing at Chilhowie.
Now, even amidst violence and war, a flag of truce was seen as sacred. It was a signal of peaceful intent, a promise of safety, no matter what kind of tensions might exist. But not so in this case. Old Tassel, Chief Abraham, and 3 other Cherokee leaders came to meet Hubbard and the militia, trusting that flag of truce. Instead, Hubbard allowed John Kirk, the surviving son of the massacred Kirk family who had joined the militia, to avenge his family to enter the parley site. Young John Kirk came inside armed with a tomahawk, and driven by revenge, Kirk killed Old Tassel with that weapon, along with 6 other Cherokee representatives, including 2 chiefs.
When Sevier returned and found out what had happened, he confronted Kirk about the incident. Kirk's response was basically, hey, an eye for an eye, saying John Sevier himself would have done the same thing if he'd been in, well, Kirk's shoes. Well, this was seen as a blatant betrayal, an unforgivable act even by the standards of the day. The Maryland Gazette condemned the killing, stating that the flag of truce was supposed to be inviolable even amongst the most barbarous people, sacred by the law and custom of nations. Now, that's a quote. And they weren't the only ones. There was widespread outrage across the western counties. And the consequences, well, you guessed it, they were immediate. The Cherokee saw the murders as a betrayal of their trust, a total disregard for the agreements that Old Tassel had worked so hard to maintain. Cherokee warriors rallied to Dragging Canoe's cause. Well, settlers, too, were shaken by the event. Some were outraged by the betrayal, while others believed that the revenge was, well, it was justified. But overall, the massacre became a symbol of the breakdown of any hope for peace.
And as you can expect, the Cherokee intensified their resistance, which led to more violence on both sides, culminating in brutal incidents like the Cherokee Massacre at Cabot Station in 1793. It was as if Old Tassel's death marked the end of any hope for peace or coexistence in the region.
And Steve, there's something to be said about John Sevier's role in all of this. Some people accused him of orchestrating the massacre by deliberately staying away, knowing that Hubbard and the others would act rashly. Well, Sevier denied those claims, and even Kirk himself admitted that it was his own thirst for revenge that fueled the attack. But regardless, the bloodshed still left a dark mark on Sevier's legacy.
That's right, Rod, and even the Continental Congress spoke out, condemning the attack. Andrew Pickens, representing the justices of South Carolina, sent a formal protest to those on the western frontier, expressing their horror at the murders. These voices called for restraint and respect in dealing with Native communities, recognizing that those betrayals could only lead to more violence. And by the way, Rod, there's a connection between this story and a famous murder case that happened not long before the Trail of Tears occurred. You see, old Tassel had a son named George Tassel. In 1830, George was tried and convicted of the murder of a white man on Cherokee land. Now, the Cherokee appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court for a stay of execution and asked for a ruling that George Tassel couldn't be tried in a Georgia court since the crime happened on Cherokee land, and thus the Cherokee had jurisdiction in the matter. The Supreme Court granted the stay, but Georgia ignored the court's ruling and hanged George Tassel anyway. That case set a precedent that the Cherokee Nation was sovereign on the same level as a state, a precedent still in effect today. So there you go.
Wow. Well, I knew that dragging canoe had been into a lot of things, and I'd heard about these sort of things. First time I'd ever heard of Slim Tom. Mm-hmm. But, you could see some of this stuff kind of like, I kind of call it almost like materializing in front of you, showing the way, like, kind of, getting them to kind of, give in a little bit and stuff, be nice to them and so forth. And then the ones who really had a price, so to speak, to pay to somebody, that's when they swore out their revenge on them and everything. So, this is all just, wow, interesting stuff. I did not know this about the Kirk family, but you mentioned a couple of places in here. Chilhowie, that's pretty close, of course. We said that's on the Little Tennessee River or something like that is what it is.
The Little River, yeah.
Little River. That, I'm familiar with at least Knoxville and that part of Chilhowie Park.
Right.
They've got that name of Chilhowie Park, and we did a little bit of some talking one night, I think, while we were off air, and we were kind of talking about the name Chilhowie and where it came from, and you've got it there, and then, of course, you've got Chilhowie, Virginia. You've got those names out there. But, it's all very interesting in and of itself that it was almost like there were multiple agendas here by the Cherokee and, yes, by the settlers at what they wanted. They wanted certain things. They wanted it by force. The Cherokee wanted back at them, but then the Cherokee, some of them wanted to get along with them in a peaceful way. But it just sounds almost like a giant soap opera today is what it sounds like.
Well, it's the story you see all over the world. Mm-hmm. Some people try to make peace, but there's always this tit for tat thing.
Right.
Somebody attacks you, so you attack them back, then they attack you, and it's just a never-ending cycle until both parties decide to just stop and make a real total final peace. Now, I'd mentioned John Sevier, and there's this little connection, a little bit more, a deeper connection with John Sevier here.
Okay.
This is right about the time that the state of Franklin kind of fell apart. Mm-hmm. And as you know, John Sevier was the governor of the state of Franklin.
Right.
At about this time, I think not too long before this, that's when John Sevier and I think it's John Tipton had their little battle at the Tipton Haynes place, which is near Johnson City, in which, how much of the background of this do you know?
A little, not a whole lot, but you probably have to refresh my memory on it.
Okay. Sort of like this. North Carolina had sort of given up their claim to the territory over the mountains.
Okay, I knew that.
That's when Franklin came into being.
Mm-hmm.
Not long after that, they decided to re-exercise authority over that territory. So they appointed judges, sheriffs, deputies, court clerks, other officials into those counties. So for a while you had Washington County, Franklin, and Washington County, North Carolina. 2 sets of judges, 2 sets of police officers, 2 sheriffs, all that. Mm-hmm. Same with Sullivan County, same with Greene County. Okay. And this all came to a head, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Tipton had the sheriff relieve John Sevier of some of his property. And some of that property might have included slaves. All mm-hmm. right. And so Sevier goes down to the Tipton place, and there's a little battle that goes on in which the Washington County, North Carolina sheriff was killed. Sevier then leaves, and not too long after that, the governor of North Carolina declares that he is guilty of treason against the state.
Ah, okay. Mm-hmm. Now I know where you're going with this. Okay.
Okay. And it didn't make matters any better that right about this time, Corn Tassel or Old Tassel mm-hmm. was murdered.
Yeah.
And he had been in command of all that.
Wow.
Now, to finish up on John Sevier, he was picked up and taken back to Morganton to be put in jail. Mm-hmm. The sheriff over there at Morganton kind of liked Sevier, so he let him out on probation, mm-hmm. saying, you just stay here in the county and we're good. Well, Sevier's friends come over there and pick him up and take him back over here to Tennessee or to Franklin. Mm-hmm. And eventually everything kind of worked its way out. And in the end, I think Sevier, before Tennessee was formed, actually ran for and was elected to the legislature down in Raleigh for a little while before Tennessee came into being.
I remember hearing of that. So,
yeah. So that my little bit of extraneous history for what it's worth.
Okay. One other question, and you feel free to answer this if you know and so forth. But there was a mention back there of a Treaty of Long Island. Is this the Long Island that we know of in the Holston River that originally later became Kingsport, or what we would know of Kingsport?
Yeah, I misspoke. I should have said the Long Island of the Holston. Yeah, that was the treaty that gave up a lot of the land out toward the west. Yeah.
So you said that because first thing hit my mind, not that I'm craving one by any means, but a Long Island tea. That's what I was thinking of when you said that. And I thought, Long Island, huh? I wonder. No, it couldn't be New York. It has to be in the middle of the Holston River, and so it was. So it's what I thought. So I'm glad you clarified that.
I drive over that river just about every day and see that sign that talks about it right there on the side of the road.
Okay.
And folks, that is the story of the Kirk Massacre and the murder of Old Tassel, another one of the stories of Appalachia. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And be sure to also subscribe to the Stories Podcast, the audio version, on your favorite podcast app. Till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.
So long.